Oh, not again. God, stupid belt broke. And look at that. There's still plenty of grit left. Wait a second, I've got an idea. There we go. Welcome back to my workshop, and I've got a confession to make. I don't actually have a belt sander. But I still think this is a pretty handy project. And all credit goes to my dad for coming up with it. He does have a belt sander and some very old belts where the tape has just lost its stickiness and they came apart. So he came up with this idea, and I decided it'd be a great thing to build. And it's so handy, I thought I'd share it with all you folks. Here's a better look at what we're talking about. This tape right here sometimes just comes apart. It's pretty sturdy, but the adhesive gives up over the years or with heat and whatnot. And if you still got good grit, why throw this great sandpaper away? This is the sanding block. It's got finger grooves in here for a good purchase. And it's got this clamping design back here. So that holds the sandpaper in. I designed this block for a 3-inch by 21-inch belt. Fits great. If you got a 4-inch belt, that might be a little bulky in the hand. We are going to need a piece of wood 3 inches wide for a 3-inch belt, or 4 inches wide for a 4-inch belt, obviously. About 2 inches thick, maybe 1 3/4 would be fine for your hand, and about 8 inches long. But I went out and bought a belt at the hardware store. They had 3 by 18 and 3 by 21, so I got the 21 because a little quick math and guesstimation, I realized that 18 might be a hair short. So definitely make the length here appropriate to match your belt sander. These small engineering squares are really handy for layout work. That's my square face, so I want to reference off of it. I gotta square this up. You see that angle there? So my marking gauge to the smallest side. I know this is already, I already flattened this face. Take this all the way around here. Alright, so now I got to trace a pattern on here to make the nose of this round. Just so happens, marking gauge is just about right. So we want to round this off with our number 4 plane here. Obviously, we try to come in here, this direction, we have tremendous tear out here. However, we can still move the plane along this axis if we have the blade at less than a 45-degree angle. So something like this, it's still going to be the same, just like going with the grain this way. Pretty nifty trick. All right, you get the idea. I'm going to keep at this till I'm to the line. I want to clarify one thing here. As you're working with your plane, what you're doing is basically putting angles on here. And then you're coming back and you're knocking the points off of those angles, bisecting them. So you keep getting more and more and more little facets on here until it's really close to round, because all your facets are really close together. Hopefully that makes sense. And then I hate to use sandpaper when I can avoid it, but this is one of those situations where sandpaper is about the only thing that works. This 3M sandpaper that's plastic instead of paper, the greatest thing in the world for curves. This is the layout I've come out with for the stop that's going to hold the sandpaper in place. It's going to be constructed out of a 1-inch oak dowel, which is going to sit in here like this, and then we're going to cut out a V in our block. That way the dowel will always have 2 points, just 2 points of contact where it really clamps down. I'm doing that as opposed to just cutting this out and using that as its own plug, because then everything has to be parallel. You know, the whole surface has to be made up this way. We just got 2 points of contact to worry about when the dowel comes in here, clamped in here from the back. Now this V obviously doesn't have to come out all the way to a point here, because this will just be dead space. So I've figured out where I can drill a 1/2-inch hole with a 1/2-inch bit, and we'll just terminate the hole there in a nice curve. That way there's no stress points in the wood like you would have with a V. Got my engineer square here for reference for vertical. I've got my bit and brace. Had to make a tiny pilot hole because the tip is busted off of this screw. But hey, it was $1. And of course we want to finish from the other side, one, to avoid tear out, and two, with a deep hole like this, any bit, small degree that we're off from vertical will kind of balance out. You see in there we're just a wee bit off, but it's really close. Here comes the hard part, trying to cut this at an angle. To help us out, set this crooked in my vise. That way when we cut, we can actually be on the vertical. Careful when you make a knife wall on end grain like this. Don't just drive your chisel down into it and you'll split your whole project in half. Take it easy at the end here so you don't bust through and mar the heck out of the bottom of the hole. Not too shabby. And that's what we have after sawing. Now I'm just going to come in here and clean this up a little bit with the chisel, carefully paring. Alright, that'll do for now, because I've got to cut the dowel and size it. We'll put it in here and make sure everything's parallel. There could be a little bump or hump in there, and we'll know when we set the dowel in. When you buy dowels, sight down and make sure they are straight, and also check the ends and make sure they weren't spliced together with two little pieces that are now offset. You'd think a finished product like this would be a lot better, but I see terrible, terrible workmanship in dowels. Got our dowel in there, and as you can see, we got a little bit of a discrepancy here, as it's should be, you know, perfectly parallel here, but it's drooping down. If we come over to the side, pretty obvious, left a bit of a bump here, so I'll get in there, carefully pare that down, and check, and pare, and check, and pare, and check until I've got it just right. Oh, that took less work than I thought. Let me see if I can get this on camera here, but it's looking quite parallel. Now let's round these off, and then we'll do the hardware. I'm not going to be able to get inside here with any plane iron, so we'll just use the hateful sandpaper set. Just found the perfect tool for sanding inside there, just to clean it up a little bit. The plug we cut out. For hardware, I wanted to use these thumb screws, but they're too short. And the 2-inch ones are really expensive. So instead, I'm going to use a toilet bolt. We'll drill a hole in here. This is 5/16. We'll epoxy this into place, and then cut the head off and put a wing nut on it. So our screw will be in there like that. Right now it's just threaded in. I'll mix up some epoxy and glue it in place. Obviously we're also going to need to drill a hole through our dowel. To facilitate that, I'm going to put a flat spot on it. Snail's just peeking out the other side. Mixing together some 30-minute epoxy here. I like the 30-minute because it's runny. So put the screw in there with the cut side down. Go ahead and put a little bit in the hole to start with. me a lot because this was actually tight enough to thread in there. And jammed a few nuts on the end here to help me thread it in. There's a small crack in here, so I'm going to go ahead and drizzle a little epoxy in it to let that cure, and I'm going to get some lunch. This needs some kind of grip on the side. So there's a number of ways that we could do this. Probably the best option would be a gouge, but I don't have one of appropriate size. Another option would be to come in here and drill holes about 3/4 of an inch in diameter, about a 1/4 inch deep, and then chisel out all the way between them carefully. Or, since I don't have a gouge, I do have a molding plane. So I'm going to set a little fence in here and just use the molding plane to make a groove, being careful not to go too close to the nose, starting about here and then going all the way out the back. Alright, so there's our groove. And like I said before, I stayed away from the nose here a bit so we can still use the full width of the nose for, profiling type tasks. And then we'll just repeat that on the other side. Alright, it's already time for the finish. Now, a lot of my tools I like to do boiled linseed oil and paste wax finish on because it's really easy to patch up later down the road when they get knocked around. Just slap some more boiled linseed oil on it. However, being as how this is going to be a sanding block, I really think we want to do a slick finish that the dust will just brush right off of, blow right off of without sticking. So, I've got an idea here for a little bit of fun. Because this is ash, you've got these alternating patterns in the grain where the darker bits are very open pores and the lighter bits are fairly closed. So the first step to this finish is to put some shellac on here. Here I've got a 2-pound cut of garnet shellac. So let's get that on there. Alright, step number the next. I'm going to apply some dark finish and then rub it off pretty quickly. In this case I got Jacobian Minwax. Next time I buy a dark finish, I think I'm going to go full on ebony for really high contrast. Be sure to make a big mess of your workbench. That's important. So the last step to finishing it is that we continue to put on coats of our shellac. Probably another 2-3 coats on top of our stain once it's dried, so that we seal up the pores and provide a nice slick surface, like I mentioned before, that will shed the dust since this is a sanding block. And the nice thing about shellac is you can recoat it after about 10 minutes it's dry.
Keep an eye out for your runs. Make sure to avoid them. And it's hard to go wrong. Your final coat, or before your final coat, you might want to sand it with a really high grit sandpaper. But this isn't furniture, so we don't need that French polish. Just want to make it look nice.
This video was produced under adult supervision.